All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on what is a beautiful day down here in South Florida on this August afternoon. My name is Rachel Paletti, and I am the leader of the higher education consulting practice here at Forbes Mazars. We have a great program lined up for you today, hopefully bring you some nice, refreshing content. And to demonstrate our commitment to the higher ed industry as a whole, we have a special guest with us here, Lee Ernst from JGA. I'm going to let Lee go ahead and introduce herself, just a little bit about our firm. If you're not familiar with our service offerings, Forbes Mazars is the #1 auditor of private higher ed in the country. We have about 350 higher ed clients across our audit, tax, and consulting practices. We do all kinds of fun stuff, but some of the things that I'm most proud of are our collaborations with other experts in the industry. So I'll let Lee go ahead and introduce herself, and then we will dive right into today's content. Take it away, Lee.
Great, Rachel, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be on this webinar with you. I'm Lee Ernst, as Rachel noted. I'm the CEO of Johnson, Gross, Nickel & Associates, or as we lovingly often say, JGA. JGA is a national philanthropic consulting firm. So we most often work with institutions, higher education institutions, social services, arts and culture, and faith-based organizations with really one key goal in mind. How can we help align and partner with your organization to help accelerate generosity? That often comes through feasibility studies, audits, and assessments. And when I get to have a really good day, it's things like having to do this webinar in conjunction with Forbes to really just share what we see in the field across the national landscape in terms of advancement trends. And I would say most importantly, those practical applications or implications from those. So thanks again for having us, Rachel.
Yeah, our pleasure. So we're going to get things started off right away here. I want to chat with you a little bit about the agenda and what we're going to move through. As the title of this presentation suggests, we're going to go through top 5 trends in advancement. And I want to emphasize that we have something here today for institutions of all sizes and all sectors. So whether you're coming from a small private institution or a regional public or a community college, the JGA team definitely has some great insights for you. They're really sort of on the forefront of new technologies and new trends for this important topic. So we're going to chat with you just a little bit about the higher education outlook, just for a slide or two to sort of set the stage for why we thought it would be a really good time to bring advancement issues to our higher ed audience. We want to talk to you a bit about the role of individual donors in this process and how things are changing. Chat with you a little bit about the donor pyramid and how you can best leverage that and understand it to help whatever advancement efforts are underway at your institution. There's also some really interesting things that are going on more recently, such as a big wealth transfer that cuts across several industries. There are trends in generational giving that we want to talk to you about. And then last, but certainly not least, we want to spend some time talking about things that I hear from our clients all the time, which is how to leverage AI, data analysis, and in general technology to really serve your advancement function and your institution. So those are the trends we're going to be covering. And like I said, regardless of the type of institution you're coming to us from, we have something that we can probably help you out with today. So we, as a firm, we put out an annual outlook every year. The 2024 outlook reveals some interesting things, some information, our trends that we follow over several years since we've been doing the outlook. But we did have a fair amount of interesting insights with regard to the sort of advancement function at institutions. And I wanted to just underscore these trends that we noticed, really to set the stage for why Lee and her team are here talking with you today. What won't be surprising to many folks in this audience, if you're following the sort of higher ed media cycle, is that there are many institutions out there who are reporting that their net tuition revenue is simply not keeping up with their operating expenses. This is an obvious combination of several headwinds coming together at once. Certainly, while we have seen some rebounds in enrollment in certain sectors, enrollment is not where it was 10 or 15 years ago, and we don't really have reason to expect that it's going to rebound, at least not back to that level anytime. We can chat with that. That's a different conversation for a different day, I suppose. Check back with us in January for our 2025 outlook, and I'll update you on that. But certainly over the past 5 years, our survey results, and this aligns pretty well with what we're seeing from other reports that are out there in the industry, about 60% of the schools that we surveyed were reporting budget deficits, operational deficits for the last 1, 2, or 3 years. And there seems to be this broad recognition that this kind of tuition dependency is just not sustainable given the change in the industry. When we ask our survey respondents, who are from all over the country and several different sectors, we ask them, okay, well, what are you doing to really diversify your revenue? There are some things in there that won't be surprising, like looking at the size and mix of academic programs, looking into grants revenue. But actually, the number one strategic response to questions of revenue diversification seemed to be advancement, looking at the advancement function, whether that's sort of shoring up the staff that are serving your advancement function, or looking into capital campaigns, or looking into things like an annual fund. Many institutions, 91%, are reporting that they're exploring those opportunities. And I think what's also interesting is that about 68% of the institutions who responded to us have some specific ideas for how they're going to increase their advancement activities, knowing that they might not be able to go to those same wells that they've gone to before. So I think Lee's talk today will really shed some light on that. We also know that institutions are really investing in the advancement office, especially over the next couple of years. We see about 51% of our respondents indicating that they're really looking at their spend, making sure that they have the right people and the right talent in that office to really support those efforts and make sure that they're being strategic to that end. So with all that stuff in mind, I just want to reiterate that this is an important topic. Certainly looking at this piece of your operations and thinking through what tools you have in the toolkit at your disposal will be a benefit, and certainly is keeping in industry best practices. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask Lee to take over. We're going to kick off with our first polling question. And that polling question just asks, how familiar are you with advancement? Fundraising, help us understand our audience and make sure that we're targeting our comments accordingly.
Great.
So we'll leave that up. Oh, go ahead, Lee.
I was just saying, thank you, Rachel. While we leave that up to allow people to respond and to read before we show the answers, I wanted to, just say that was such a perfect setup, Rachel, that showing that data. It's something that we, as a philanthropic consulting firm, are regularly asked. Do we have the right staff? Do we have enough staff? What can we expect from an ROI? So I think that's a really good way to kind of start this conversation. And the other thing I would say is, to borrow what you were saying, Rachel, in the polls, please put in comments or questions in the chat. Rachel and team at Forvis are actually going to be reading those, and I'll be able to respond to those throughout this presentation. And then we'll also leave time, 10 minutes till the end for more Q&A. So I just want to put that out there as well to encourage your comments and questions. And it looks like we've got our first poll results back. So if okay, Rachel, I'll go ahead and read those results and dig in. So what you have on the screen here, if you look at the 3 responses, about half of us here attending this webinar say a little, right? I work with fundraising or philanthropy or advancement or generosity. Our nomenclature is growing as we think about how we define giving in America. But a little, I work with advancement staff on projects at my institution, about half. And then we have about a third of us that are saying, what exactly are we talking about here? And I would just say, when we say the word advancement, it means how can our organization and or institution work with either individuals, corporate, or foundation to help raise private dollars, philanthropy, as opposed to earned income or other types of revenue like a tuition. And then the last poll result that we see on the screen, 18% of us say, very much so. I work currently in it or in a previous role. So I will be expecting all sorts of good questions and comments coming from these various groups. So let me move us forward. The next roughly 40 minutes, what I'll want to do is spend time going through 5 key advancement trends. These are based upon research. They're based upon the work that my firm and others do in the nation. And based upon things that we are seeing as part of our work, our job is to always be thinking about 12 to 18 months ahead, right, in terms of trends and what we see coming up. So let's get started with the first trend in advancement or fundraising. Individual donors continue to drive giving, and foundation giving is continuing its upward trend. So if I were to have a yellow highlighter right now, I would underscore, I would put my yellow highlighter through the word individual. And here is why. When you look at the data that's coming out of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, there is an annual report that is done every year. Some of you may be familiar with this. If not, I would highly encourage you to go to the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and it is done in partnership with the Giving Institute. This is a consortium that we're a part of fundraising consultants and data tech firms that really help to drive best practices in the advancement field. The latest report that came out of the Giving Institute and Giving USA shows the following. It measures how much giving in dollars is essentially through our country every year. So when you look at the screen in front of you, what we know from our most recent set of data, which was the ending year of 2023, that nearly $560 billion was given by Americans in our country. What I think is important to really highlight here is the big piece of the pie in front of us. Out of all dollars given last year, 67% of those gifts came from individuals. And really, when we think about it, you want to tie 67% with the other pie piece, bequest. Bequest would be planned gifts, those that are leaving an institution or your institution in their will. Individuals make up those gifts, right? They are those decision makers. So it's actually 75%. So when we think about advancement, when we think about the importance of fundraising and how to structure our time, our resources, our investments, we know that a big piece of decision making is coming from individuals. So then that really drives the next question is, how are we engaging with them? The next slide is another kind of bite at the apple on this Giving USA data. This shows total giving in America from the time this research study was implemented, which was 1983. So from 1983 through present day, this shows you the giving and then the giving adjusted for inflation. Since 1983, giving has either stayed the same or increased, with the exception of 4 key areas. And those areas are actually in the it was 1987, 2008, and 2009. We think about our economy at that time in 2008, 2009, and then also in 2022, around the time of the pandemic. If I go to the next slide, I think this is a really interesting slide, and I think about all of the various attendees that we have on this webinar, and you can see, so to speak, where your organization fits in. This is a breakdown of, again, the total amount of giving in our country, that nearly $560 billion, by type of recipient organization. And there are a few things that I want to point out because I think, again, it really helps us think about our own roles, or at least adjacent roles if we're working with those in fundraising and advancement. Religion receives the largest amount of dollars in our country, 24%. Historically, this has always been what we'd call the largest part of the pie. We also know that this piece of the pie, this 24% representation, has also been slightly decreasing over the years. The other 2 largest type of organizations receiving dollars would be human services, and at that same percentage, 14%, education. And the reason why I think this is so important, when we think about donors or those that our institution might want to engage to make a gift, it's critical to think about the different priorities, their different motivations, and what does giving in our country look like, and what is going on in those different sectors, and are there lessons learned from those different sectors? And then the last slide on this data set before I take us to a poll is a little bit of a deep dive, if you will, specifically on the sector of education. Just a note, if you are with an organization that is not in education, there is a breakdown of every single sector. So the arts, social service, religion, etc., as part of this report, of this Giving USA report. And so if you wish to have a deeper dive, that information is available. But for the sake of time, we won't go through each sector. So we'll take a slice here. And this is to look at where giving to education has occurred, again, from 1983 to 2023. What we know is that education, again, is 14%, right, of all giving in America. We also know that when adjusted for inflation, giving to education increased about 7%. It was 6.7% from last year to this, well, from 2022 to 2023. We also know, according to CASE, the Council for Advancement and Service Education, that roughly $58 billion was given specifically to higher ed. So if you think about what we see here on the screen to education, this would be education not only to colleges and universities, but also to those K through 12 institutions, those private institutions. So CASE reports that $58 billion was given to higher ed. So I hope that helps at least kind of break down that total number of giving. So before we take a moment and think about what do we do with this data, right? How do we start to translate this into implications? I want to take a moment and put a next poll in front of us. What do you think is the number one reason high net worth donors give to your institution? There was a survey done, and I'll give you a sneak peek that we're going to actually dive through this in about 5 minutes or so on this. But the various answers here for you to choose: belief in the mission, belief their gift can make a difference, personal satisfaction or fulfillment, or not sure. So I'll give you a moment to think about this, but as you're putting your results in, one thing I would say is that there was a study done by the Bank of America several years ago that actually surveyed those households that they termed or qualified high net worth donors. I think those that were giving 100,000 or 250,000. And they had very interesting survey results. So we'll show those to you soon. But before we get to that slide, I'll wait until we have time to show the poll results, and then we'll go through these. So as you see on the screen here, our results from our group are somewhat kind of equally distributed here. The highest number of us say the number one reason that donors give to us, it's belief in the mission. And I won't give you the answers yet, but I'll just tell you, those that said belief in the mission, you're on to something there. So as spoiler alert. The second one, belief their gift can make a difference, at 33%, personal satisfaction or fulfillment, 21%, and then, hey, I'm not sure, 10%. One thing that I think is important to kind of hold close to us as we think about this is the extent to which your institution knows this information is probably the extent to which your advancement efforts will be either somewhat successful or wildly successful. At the end of the day, we know that fundraising advancement is a highly personalized, as we lovingly say, a contact sport. And what it requires is building relationships and authentic communication. And when you get to know these answers, you're usually in the sweet spot. So with that, let's wrap up this first trend around implications. We saw the data results, right, from Giving USA data. We know that individual giving is going up. We know that foundation giving is going up. So what does that mean, either for you personally or for your institution? 3 things that we'd outline here. 1, engage your donors. It might sound simple, but I will tell you, unfortunately, when we went through the pandemic, what we found was that those organizations and those institutions that stayed in front of their donors, that stayed in close contact, were much better off with fundraising results afterwards, as opposed to those that said, we're going to make the assumption that they don't want to hear from us or that we're too busy. So I can't underscore enough, focusing on stewardship, thanking your donors, and that personal engagement. And I will tell you that our most successful clients are those that have a strong culture of philanthropy. And the way that we define that is not just the advancement team being responsible for fundraising, but having a shared understanding across your institution, across your organization about what is each one of us, what does it mean for us and our role to play a lead role in fundraising. It might be sharing the story of why you work there. It might be saying, hey, I know someone that I think would be a good potential donor, but that's critical. The second piece I would raise on the practical implications would be reframing philanthropy. And I think I hinted at this earlier when I was making my remarks after Rachel, but how do we think about philanthropy at our institution? What about the words generosity? The reason why I bring this up, there's been a movement over the last 2 years. Actually, our founder, Ted Grossnickel, has helped co-chair this effort, and it's called the Generosity Commission. It's a national report. It's going to come out September 17th, so mark your calendars. JJ will be helping to promote it along with the Generosity Commission themselves, and you can look that up, or I can, if you have questions, I can give you the website. But it is to rethink about how we thinking about giving in America. What if we were to start measuring giving beyond dollars? What about time? What about the way people engage? We know that younger generations feel strongly about this, and so I think it's a critical time in our nation to be thinking more broadly and inclusively about philanthropy. And I think generosity is a term that helps allow us to do that. And then lastly, actively engaging foundations. We know from the data that we showed earlier, foundation giving is increasing from foundations. How are we using trust-based philanthropy and engagement with foundations? How are we having authentic conversations, seeking their input and their advice as we go forward in trying to build a relationship with them? So with that, I'm going to move to the second trend now, and this is about the traditional donor pyramid, if you will, and how it is shifting. I'm going to take us to the next slide because I think this helps on the visual. Some of us may say, yep, I've seen this before. I'm in fundraising. This looks familiar. Some of us might go, what is this? So I'll attempt to take the first 10 or so seconds and just orient us to what we're looking at. What you see in front of you is what I would call a tool or a guide that is most often used in fundraising and advancement teams or shops. It is a way to take a total number, or what we would call a goal, a fundraising goal. So the column that reads goal, if you look to the bottom, you see a number. So in this case, this is a gift chart or a pyramid for a campaign goal or a fundraising goal of 5 million. And this is a sample. The purpose of putting this together, this document, is to start to understand if we have a goal, and in this case, a 5 million, how might we achieve that number? What type of gifting, how many gifts, and at what amount would we need as an organization to see our way clear to that goal? Again, in this case, of 5 million. The reason why I'm taking time to go through this is because for the past now about 8 to 10 years, we are seeing a shift, and it's an important shift to be aware of because there's a lot of implications that are tied behind it. The shift that we, both fundraising consultants and advancement professionals, are seeing, and even if you're not in advancement, you are feeling it, is that the shape of the pyramid is shifting. I'm not going to say that 3 times fast. The shape of the pyramid is shifting. The way it is shifting is that it is getting more narrow. We are seeing more gifts at that top of the pyramid, those lead gifts, those big amounts. And those big gift amounts are making up a majority of the campaign. We are also seeing smaller gifts. So when we qualify smaller gifts, sometimes you'll hear maybe the word annual fund or annual operations or unrestricted giving, those gifts occurring. And what is happening is that in the middle of the pyramid, there is not much engagement with donors, activity, time, or efforts often able to spend on those individuals or corporations or foundations in that, quote, middle of the pyramid, the middle gifting, because of the resources and the dollars required and coming from that very top of the pyramid and the bottom. What this means is what you have in front of you here. Typically speaking, campaigns in our country are raising as much as 90% of total dollars, funds, from a very small percentage of donors, right? 10%. In higher ed, and I would be curious if this resonates with many of us coming from higher education institutions. I know there were a good amount on this webinar today. That number is actually not 90-10. It's more like 94% to 6% donors, or even 96 to 4. Again, that percentage or that pyramid is getting more narrow. Here's the plus side. People are very generous and are giving big gifts, or what we often will call a lead gift or a large gift. You can often think about them in 6, 7, 8 figures. And here's the downside. What are we as an organization and an institution doing to engage those individuals in the middle of the pyramid? Those that are not maybe giving through an annual appeal or an email, and they're not being personally visited by your president or CEO, executive director. Where are our time and resources? And they're often at that point, not many, for that middle of the pyramid. Here's the problem with that. If you are spending your time on only those 2 sections, how are you cultivating, if you will, the next wave or the pipeline of individuals who could be your lead donors in 5, 10, 15 years? So I'm really stressing this point because it is something that we see across the sectors in both larger and in smaller campaigns. What we have seen is really good solutions around using technology, around using data, around using AI to help answer this question. But I think it's a topic that we really need to be mindful of as we move forward. And then one other slide to really, I would say, just kind of emphasize this point, and this is specifically with higher education and giving trends. What you see here on the screen to the right of you is actually the sources from CASE, again, the case that I referenced earlier, Insights on Voluntary Supportive Education, or in the field, it's sometimes called the VSE report, where institutions self-report different data points on their fundraising. But as you see here, top donors, or those that are giving that large amount, are playing a pivotal role in giving to higher education. And in this case, we see 85% of funds coming from donors giving more than $25,000, representing less than 2%. So again, it's another way to really illuminate this point. With that, I want to now take a stop and use another time for a poll here. And this poll is borrowing from what we were just talking about, technology. Are you, as your institution, currently using AI in your work? And we will keep that open so you can define in your work and however you choose.
And Lee, if you don't mind, while we're on this poll, it might be a good sort of stopping point for a couple questions. So there's a couple questions in the chat. I'll try to do them justice as best I can. One of the questions I think is referring to, are there sort of subscription services or donor lists that you see institutions accessing? Is there some sort of like information sharing platform for institutions that are looking to get information about how donor relationships are developing and who they're developing with?
Yeah, it's a great question. And to your point, Rachel, I'll try to be as succinct as possible, knowing there's probably a few other questions. The short answer is yes. And here's how I would categorize yes. There are a multitude of platforms and technology that allow your institution to gain insight and access to donors. So what do we mean? Wealth screening is what I would call a technology that was done well in the past, but I will tell you authentically, it is not enough. So here's what I mean by that. In the past, there were companies that would use external data points and giving to your organization, create algorithms and to say, here's how much we think this person could give, right? An estimated giving capacity. That's helpful, but it's not enough. What we need to know now is how they're engaging with you. And so we're seeing more and more of that come out. And truth be told, at JJ, we actually partnered with one of the wealth screening companies to create our own product around that because of the need. So the short answer is yes, there are companies like iWave and DonorSearch and Blackball. The list goes on. It allows you to use science to then balance the art, which is you and your relationships with the institutions. And then there's also predictive analytics that says, how are we using AI or learned language models to help us constantly have an understanding of how our donors are behaving through their giving, and it then makes predictions on how likely they are to give in the future. And I can go on in that later, but that's a succinct answer for now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then, so stay tuned, everyone. We'll get some more insight on the AI piece later and on the analytics piece. Another really great question is, given the donor pyramid that you showed on the previous slide there, how does that sort of knowledge of that set of patterns change or impact the way you staff the advancement office?
Yeah, it is a great question. The extent to which your organization can understand who lives in the pyramid, right? It's one thing to have a name and a number and a gift amount, but when you can start to understand what the capacity is of your full donor base through that predictive analytics work, the engagement and the well screening, then you can do a staff analysis to say, here's what's expected out of our donor base if we have X amount of staff conducting X amount of visits or engagement. Here's what happens if you have only 10 staff versus 15, and you can start to model what that looks like on capacity. And we often find that that is the most powerful tool that an advancement team can have, particularly when the board is deciding to move forward in a campaign and thinking about the number. We always say, have you reviewed your staff and reviewed it against your donor-based capacity to ensure that if you want to hit a certain number, you have the staff to do it. We always say, do it with both arms in front of you, not one arm tied behind your back.
Right. Makes sense. I mean, it's like with strategic planning, you have to actually prioritize the resources and make sure that you're moving beyond a sort of wish list approach and into an actual strategy. Yeah.
That should be the tagline for all campaign planning, Rachel. That's right.
Love it. I'm going to trademark it. Okay, so and then another question here, which I think is a really great practical question is there, if you have a high percentage of alumni giving, small give your alumni are engaged in this work, does it encourage more substantial giving from the higher net worth donors? In other words, is there some sort of correlation between enthusiasm and then big contributions?
I would say it really depends on the donor and their motivation, particularly high net worth donors. What I will say across the board, we see as a motivating factor, whether you're a high net worth donor or not, is the extent to which your board, your organization or your institution's board is giving. We know that, when you walk into a foundation, one of the first questions you'll get asked is, now, what is the percentage of your board? Are they giving 100%? Right? There's this expectation. And if not, by all foundations, many. But across the board, we hear it in our feasibility study interviews, and we hear it from our VPs and presidents we work with, is people are asking, what is the board's role in this? Is the board giving? Is the board in the vanguard and leading early? And so I think that's really what I would underscore out of that question. For some, alumni giving is critical, but for almost all, the board giving will come up before they make their final decision.
Yeah, so also thinking through, how to identify, board members who are going to contribute in some capacity or another. And then also through part of the regular board training and onboarding process, emphasizing the importance of that role in improving the giving to the institution.
Yes. You got it. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Should I keep going with the poll for now, Rachel?
Yeah, no, go right ahead. Yeah, and then for those of you, if you have more questions, we will leave some time at the end as well. So feel free to keep dropping those in the chat.
I would say these are great questions. And as the person on the other side that's talking, there's nothing more I love than getting the questions. So please keep bringing them. I'll share the results that are on our screen regarding the poll. About 40% of us say, we're not using AI yet, but we're exploring it. A third of us are saying no, and about a third of us are saying yes. So we could take probably a full hour on just the intersection of AI and philanthropy. I'll try to do as much justice as I can in the last trend, the fifth trend. So stay tuned for more on that. But I appreciate everyone sharing, because I think it helps give us all a sense of where we're sitting with the topic that, as I view, is a journey. So before I take us to our third trend, this is the report, or the survey, I should say, that I was referencing earlier from the last poll. The source is the 2021 Bank of America study of charitable giving by affluent households. I love this slide. Why do I love it? It's because it helps us understand and maybe break away maybe from some of our biases about why people give. When they were asked why they give, if you look at the top of your screen, belief in your mission. So though was it the 32.5% that said belief in your mission? You got that poll question right. Here's one other thing I want to point out. Halfway through your screen, you'll see one of the options that the survey respondents had, and it was to receive a tax benefit. Look how low those percentage of scores are, and you can see the color here for the code. How low to receive a tax benefit is, as opposed to belief in the mission, belief that your gift can make a difference, or for personal satisfaction. So I think sometimes we will make assumptions about why people give. One, we ask them. And two, I think this helps give us a better sense. So before I take us to the third trend, I want to take a moment and to think about this donor pyramid, right? That was our second trend. The donor pyramid is shifting. What does that mean? How can we take some practical things away from this? I think Rachel teed it up well when she talked about data. Embrace data. We have limited resources at our institutions, whether they are in advancement or outside of advancement. How are we taking and enabling the ever-changing role of technology in our world to our benefit, to help form connections with donors? I will tell you, I'm a big believer, AI is not going to replace humans with fundraising. I won't go past that, but what it can do is be a tool for us to build deeper, more meaningful connection. And I think that's a really important distinction. I think AI can be very helpful. How do we use it to build our personal relationships? The other thing I would say is the extent to which you can use technology to identify potential donors. It allows you then to allocate your staff and resources to those that might be most receptive to a future conversation with your organization. So with that, let's go to the third out of the fifth trend. I'm going to move us through a little quicker on this one, just because I want the last 10 minutes to really be for the remaining good questions and comments. A great wealth transfer is coming up in America. If I put a poll up now, I bet nobody would say, I don't know what you're talking about. This isn't new, but it does impact advancement, right? It does impact the way we think about our work and our strategy and our investment toward the sector. From the New York Times, this was last year. This number we know is changing, but as of last year, of the 84 trillion, and again, put an asterisk next to that trillion, was projected to be passed down, right, from older Americans to either millennials and or Gen X heirs through roughly the next 20 or so years. Here's something that I want to point out, and this is going to lead us into thinking about generational differences in our fourth trend. If you look to the right of your on the slide and the annual wealth projected to be inherited by each generation, millennials, the box on the right upper right side, look at that line essentially kind of shoot straight up in trillions from roughly now through the next 20 years. On the reverse side, look at baby boomers, but then also look at Gen X and Gen Z. So it's very interesting as we see the projections of where there's the anticipation of the transfer of wealth. What that means is, who are we engaging now makes a difference. You know, long gone are the days where we think about planned giving when someone is 70. Priorities already set there. And as the transfer of wealth is occurring, we need to be thinking about how are we building meaningful relationships now with these individuals that are going to be receiving this transfer, if you will. One of the things that we've been working with a lot of our institutions in response to this, or to try to be thinking ahead, is integrating planned giving through your advancement or fundraising programs. How does planned giving look in your major giving? So that would be the donors that are maybe not receiving just email or mail, but are receiving personal visits from staff. What does it look like for your institution to talk about planned giving. So bequest, gifts of life insurance, a gift in the will, in communication to your annual fund donors, to those kind of annual support campaigns. I think the extent to which our institutions can think more comprehensively and broadly about planned giving, the much better off, so to speak, our institutions will be from a a philanthropic projection standpoint. And I think we need to reimagine the way we think about a major gift. Sometimes I will tell you, we run into organizations where someone has made an unbelievable planned gift. Upon the death upon their death, the organization will receive X amount. Steward those gifts now. We know from research that those individuals that make planned gifts during their lifetime and share that news to the organization will most likely make other gifts during their lifetime. They will not just wait for the planned gift to materialize or to be realized, but you must steward them and thank them during their lifetime. So with that, I want to take us to our fourth trend. We were just starting to talk about it a little bit, and that's generational giving, or shall I say, the differences in generations and how they want to be engaged. Depending on the age of all of us on this webinar, some of us remember when there was a big talk about millennials coming up into the workforce, what that meant, what did they want, what were their preferences. We are now at a time where we have more generations engaged in living than ever before in this country. So what does that mean for fundraising, right? What does that mean for us as we think in terms of philanthropy? What you see here in front of you is a breakdown of boomers, and I won't go through every single age. There's actually, you can do probably just a quick Google, but for time. But boomers would be the silent and great, so kind of the World War II veterans, which are it's a much smaller and smaller group of individuals. Then the boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Gen Z. What I think is so important here is to look at the difference in the annual giving by generation from approximately 2016 to 2022. Look at the increase in millennials, roughly $1,000 annually to $1,300. The same with Gen X. And then look at the boomers, nearly a increase of a decrease of about 12%, of about $350. This helps us think about, you go back to the donor pyramid, right? And you think about not only the size of gifts, but who lives in your donor pyramid and how do we engage them? Long gone are the days where mass appeals are sent out to everyone. It's critical that we customize our messaging because we know that generations require different type of communication preferences. And one quick note that I'll make here to just elaborate on the different types of interest from generations. All generations except for boomers, baby boomers, support some form of health charity or nonprofit. Boomers are the only generation that prioritizes giving to education. You'll see that on the bottom of the screen under the boomers donors. You'll see the education highlighted in gray. And I say this again to illuminate the difference, right? We have to think about our donor base in very customized, segmented ways. And that's where I say use technology to help do that. And then the last piece, or the last two pieces on this trend, I would say, would be about the changing demographics. We talked a little bit earlier already, right, about planned giving, the notion of individuals giving through different vehicles such as life insurance or a bequest or an estate in the will. Fewer baby boomers plan to increase their gifts in the coming years. However, if you think about millennials and Generation X, they expect to increase. So how do we then think about our staffing? How do we think about our resources to acknowledge this upcoming change in generations, specifically with the anticipated wealth transfer that's going to be occurring and the motivations of those millennials and generations? And then while older generations are giving to institutions, generally speaking, younger generations are giving to causes and may not have as much loyalty to a specific charity. I think we see this in alumni giving in higher ed. Nationally, we see the alumni giving rate going down on average across colleges and universities. And if you think about giving, where it's going to be coming from now and in the future, you can see that correlation, or at least make that assumption, right? Between the boomers giving more to the loyalty, or maybe the trust in the institution, as opposed to, I want to better understand where my gift is going and more of the cause. And then the last point I'll make here before I go to trend 5 is younger donors expecting personalized messaging. I think this was highlighted a little bit earlier when I talked about the differences, but you'll see here the source, the American Survey on Successful Ads, talks about the percentage of liking personalized ads. We are all accustomed to it, right? Whether it's Amazon now, or if it's social media, we're seeing algorithms feed specifically to us. Gen Z, it's all they know, or that's what they've grown up with. So how do we translate that experience into philanthropy? We need to meet the Gen Z where they are, and the same with millennials, and they're going to be expecting their giving to have that type of information too. So lastly, on the practical implications here, tracking data is as important as ever, and then using that data to really help customize your outreach. What are you doing to engage individuals outside of their alumni class? How do you think about their affinity, if they were as part of a music organization or others? And how do you engage your entire institution, faculty or staff or program staff, to help inspire generosity as well? And then the last trend that I'll go on, and then we'll have our final poll before we wrap up in the next few minutes for questions. This last trend is one, if I get my yellow highlighter out again, I'd put it all through the words data and innovation are really driving decision-making and investments. I can't think of the last time I had a report to the board of trustees where there was not a heavy emphasis on data, on ROI, to help them make their best decision. So with that, let's pause. And before we wrap up this trend, let's open up this final poll, which is, would you like to be contacted by one of the presenters to further discuss the multiple trends that we said today? And we will wait and allow time to fill that out, and then we'll wrap up on this final trend around data and innovation.
Okay, yeah, and Leah, while we're waiting for folks to respond here, just a question that came in the chat, and then we have time for some other ones at the end too. But I want to, but do you think you have any good numbers or data on the number of sort of major gifts that are the result of planned giving, as opposed to, I mean, it might be helpful to just sort of expand on planned giving versus other kinds of giving, and how institutions can strategically respond to those different kinds of gifts?
Yes, the short answer is yes. If you think specifically with campaigns, so if an organization is in a formalized campaign, they have a set dollar amount they're wanting to raise, we will see out of a total campaign amount, gifting as high as 30 or 40% coming from planned gifts. Now, again, that's I would say an average number. It can go up or down. We're seeing that number increase. So that's one trend line that we're seeing. More and more giving to campaigns is coming from planned gifts. The other thing I would say, I think to your other point, Rachel, on planned giving is, not only are we seeing more and more planned giving or planned gifts occurring, but also more education and staff spending more time just helping to educate their donors about what is a planned gift. The notion that you can be generous to an organization with something different than cash or a check, right? It might be a deferred gift. It's maybe a charitable remainder trust and the dividends. It might be, again, a life insurance policy. What I always tell organizations is, you don't have to be the experts. You just need to be the expert question answer. And there's usually an attorney involved or a wealth advisor, but know the right questions to ask. And I think if you can live in that lane, that will at least be a good starting point.
Awesome. Okay, love that. All right, I'll let you dive into this AI stuff, and then we'll use the remaining time for questions.
It sounds great. Thank you, Rachel. So this is dangerous, but I'm trying to talk about AI in 2 minutes, right? Knowing that it's probably a 2-hour conversation, but it's critically important. It is a topic that we're feeling everywhere. For me, what I think about is, how does AI intersect with philanthropy? What you see here on the screen is actually an image created by Dolly, an AI app, and it's looking at the difference between two types of AI. There's generative AI and predictive AI. And I say that because just understanding those two key categories is really important. On the left, this image really looks at the predictive AI. It's what JJ has been spending a lot of time helping our clients with, understanding who is in your donor base, what is their giving potential, and what is the messaging that they prefer. It's using AI to help predict answers. On the right side of the screen, it's generative AI. It's when you think about ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, it's when AI is being used to help us generate content. So that's a big kind of just overview of AI. And then the other thing I want to say, and actually before I get to the slide, is there's a kind of a shout out that I want to give. It's a resource, a free resource called fundraising.ai. It's a website. It is a nonprofit. It's essentially a consortium of advancement leaders from all different sectors that have put together a framework for the ethical and responsible use of AI. We've actually sponsored pop-ups on it in recent time because the importance of understanding how to use AI ethically and responsibly. So fundraising.ai actually has 10 points outlining kind of a best usage on that. So if you want that resource, I think it's really helpful. What you see on the slide here is the balance or the blend of how do we begin to think about, as you see on the left side of the screen, that wealth screening with how people engage with you, balancing that with the demographic data, and then finally psychographic. Long gone are the days, again, we're just using wealth screening. For many of us at higher ed with institutions, we know that for many years, enrollment was able to use personas and psychographic data, and we're now able to use that in fundraising, right? Being able to not only identify the best donors, but to have customized messaging. And so I share this, it's actually something JJ has, but I shared it as an example of what is being done in the field to help you better understand how to build connections with your donors. So the last thing before we wrap up on questions is, again, the data and the innovation. If that's our fifth trend, what are the applications or the implications here? The headline is to customize your communication and your giving appeals, using that new technology to really help you have that hyper-focused communication, whether it's through appeals or conversations, and donors expect that type of messaging. So with that, I would just say thank you, Rachel. I'll turn it back over to you for any questions as we wrap up.
Sure. So one of the questions here is asking about, in general, what percentage of institutions' annual budget is funded by philanthropy. I can speak to that a little bit in the sense that the answer is I see institutions that are a little more dependent on their endowment. I see institutions that have annual funds that help fund their operations. I would say that those are a little bit more rare. But Lee, if you have any other insight to add to that, I'm sure the audience would welcome it.
It's I think to your point, it really is it varies on the size of the endowment and that draw of the endowment, right? Is it a 3, a 4, 5%, or a board approved another number? Right. I think the slide that you had at the beginning, Rachel, really illuminates the notion of the dependency, right, of tuition and how that is going down with the enrollment numbers and the increase, the dependency of advancement. It really varies, but what I can say is, if you think of, okay, here I am biased as the fundraising consultant, but when you think of the different divisions across your institution, advancement's a pretty big ROI in terms of investment. And so I think the pie is going to get bigger and bigger, the advancement pie, but I would hesitate to put a specific number on it because I just think it varies, but it's increasing is what I think I would say.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. As institutions start to explore those other strategies and sort of get away from tuition dependency, and let's be honest, I mean, grants and research-based revenue diversification just aren't as feasible for every small institution in the country, and so advancement is really a great place to look. Another question I think is really helpful around, how do we best engage current students and sort of steward our relationships with those so that they become, good. So we keep the relationship going and that they can maybe become good donors later on. As someone who I get mail, I get phone calls, I get texts from my daughter, and I probably, would be a little bit more responsive to those if I had ever been pinged about that I would be getting those emails or texts down the road after I graduated. So how do we foster those relationships basically before the graduate becomes disconnected?
I go back to the culture of philanthropy at the institution. It starts if you're at a college, when they are at school, whether they are a recipient of a scholarship, understanding, right? Where do the scholarship dollars come from? The impact of that scholarship, we'll sometimes hear scholarship dinners or stewardship dinners where the recipients are able to meet the donors. I think that's one very specific example. You think of senior class gifts, which have been around for a while. It's the notion of asking the class of seniors to make a gift all together to commemorate their time. You think about Day of Giving, where there are institutions saying kind of all hands on deck, let's focus on participation from students, faculty, and donors. So there's multiple ways to engage the student. It often, most though, will come from the top down, from leadership, and saying, I believe in advancement, and everyone else, I hope, has a role into it.
Yeah, awesome. So, then in terms of reaching back out to those, alumni or donors, even who haven't been engaged in a number of years, are there like one or two sort of low-hanging fruit type strategies that you could share with the audience to that end?
I would say, how do you take your arms around this much data and put it to here, right? That's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to find a few. That's where I would use predictive analytics. If you have 20,000 records, run them through a screening that is based on not only their wealth, but their engagement with you. And then there's a scoring setup that allows you to understand who rises to the top. That can be done in about 2 months, and it can give you a list of about 100 names from however many records, thousands and thousands. And that allows your staff to start with a very clear starting point rather than doing a needle in a haystack. Use technology.
Great. I love that. Yeah. So, and a way to think about that is just pull people off the demand curve. Identify who your most likely donors are and target those individuals rather than, sending out a bunch of blind postcards.
Yeah, exactly. Those that are putting their hand up, engage with them. They're when they're showing up to events, when they're on your alumni council, whatever it may be. But that's why JJ a few years ago said, how do we do this better? Right? Organizations need this. So using predictive analytics is a key part of it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're about at time, but Lee, thank you so much. We got some great comments in the chat here, and we really appreciate the work that JGA does and that you do. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you're in the audience and you would like Lee to reach out, we certainly will. If you've indicated that you'd like to hear from us. Have an excellent rest of your week, everyone. Thank you so much, Lee, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.